So I think there's something that's interesting here about specifically Web3 technologies, right? So what have we seen, for example, in the scientific publishing industry over the last 50 years? We've seen the trends towards consolidation, towards big players becoming bigger, stronger. More than 50% of the academic publishing market is controlled by just 4 entities. I would like to point out that these companies, like Elsevier, have the highest profit margin. They have a profit margin that's higher than companies like Apple and Google. So just let that sink in for a moment. So these are mechanisms that have essentially kept prestige captured the entire community of scientists. And what we've seen now with the OSTP memo, so the OSTP memo is essentially the White House mandating open access to papers, is that a lot of scientists are worried they're just going to get priced out of the publishing industry because how much does it cost? So for those that don't know, scientists produce their work. They'll produce a paper. You write a paper, it takes you 2 years, you run your experiments, you spend so much time polishing this paper, you're ready to submit it. You submit it. The editor usually works for free. And he'll then coordinate the schlep around finding peer reviewers that are competent to check your paper and to find flaws, improve it, and to essentially verify that it really kind of fits within the team of that specific journal. There's also computer science conferences. Communities have different ways of doing this, but essentially there's that stage. And then what happens, what has happened for a very, very, very long time, is the publisher will take and say, okay, thank you very much, everyone. Nobody gets paid out of this. And then they will sell that to libraries at exorbitant prices. This has been the subscription model. So that model has flipped around nowadays, and if you want to publish in a reputable OA journal, it'll run you anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000, right? So think about that for a moment. That is the price of having essentially your paper processed by a publishing house to get the peer review coordinated, the paper typesetted, and the brand of whatever journal ends up being on it. And that system is extremely exclusionary. And there's a lot of worries right now about what the future of open access publishing will look like, because we know that there's going to be distortions in those markets, right? So a lot of those pricing models are due to prestige. And when you think about it, scientific publisher should be competing for features, not prestige. And so there's all sorts of dysfunctions within that system that prevents it from being more equitable, more efficient. And it's not because it's impossible. There are academic communities out there that have so-called continuum open access. So they essentially do the verification process, the publication process, and there's no fee associated with that. So it's not that it's impossible. So one of the ways we could also add value as in decentralized science is create alternative platforms to essentially have the possibility to return value of curating the record to scientists, right? So you could think about that as systems where, imagine you had a button on the archive, right, where anyone could add a validation grant on a paper to get expedite peer review. How valuable would this have been when we had this, for example, this paper, this preprint on I think it was medRxiv site, saying that there's HIV insertion in COVID. We've seen this. It went all over, like a trail of fire all over social media. And peer review is an extremely long and tedious process to coordinate. How valuable would it be if we could have mechanisms that return the value of creating the scientific record to scientific societies that allow anyone to essentially interact with that record to make it more verifiable?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. No, definitely. For some perspective, an open access fee for publishing in Nature, it's going to run you anywhere between a third to a half of the salary for a graduate student, depending where you're at, up to like maybe 10% of postdoc's salary. So that's insane to think about, right? That these 4 papers are worth 1 postdoc.